Hello, everybody, and welcome to the RVing Electrifying News for February 2024. With me, as per usual, we have our two other co-hosts. We have Mr. Eric Stevens joining us from undisclosed location. We're not going to say yet where he's from. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing great, Mark. How you doing?
Very good, very good. Also joining us, we have Mr. Ian Graham joining us from an undisclosed location. How are you today, sir?
A little hint.
Very good, very good. So
our audience a hint as to our undisclosed locations.
That's right. 2/3 of the podcast is actually coming to you from out of the country. So we've got Eric in Monterrey, Mexico, and we got Ian on the coast of Mexico. What city are you near, Ian?
So I fly into Puerto Vallarta, and then I'm in La Cruz de Guanacaxtli, which is on the other side of the bay from Puerto Vallarta, about maybe 20 minutes or so. And can't beat it. It's beautiful.
Very good.
I was going to say Mark didn't get the memo. He was supposed to be in Cancun, so we have all the parts of Mexico covered.
So yeah, today's podcast is brought to you by the Tourist Board of Mexico. So enjoy while you can, gentlemen. I hope you are enjoying the weather. Although I have to say that today here in Ontario, we got up to a nice 10 degrees Celsius, and we were very pleased to see that. So.
Okay.
Ooh, 10 degrees.
It was about 34 here today in Monterey.
Yeah, I think we're like 28 to 30, somewhere around there.
Okay.
I tell you, that it was been really rough in the pool.
yeah, we're all feeling sorry for you, Ian. Yeah. Definitely all feeling sorry for you. Yeah. Well, let's get on with electrifying news this month, and let's see what we got to talk about.
All right, so we got this coming on up, and part of the reason it's so funny, Eric and I are in Mexico, and wouldn't you know that our first slide is about Mexico, and in this case it is Tesla, which I'm sure many have heard about. Tesla is going to be doing a Gigafactory in Mexico, and but back in October, Tesla was kind of putting a bit of the brakes on amid concerns about the global economy, which, I'm going to be honest, I've been kind of, even the last shareholders meeting, Elon was sort of saying still, a little concerned with some of the global economy, with the interest rates and everything else. And you know what? It's pretty blank, valid points about saying, people want to buy a car, but the interest rates can sometimes hold you off for a little bit on that. So anyways, but the governor, Samuel Garcia, is really hopeful that maybe next month we might actually start hearing about them actually breaking ground to do this. But Tesla, again, is also saying, hey, you know what? There's some issues, electrical, water, environment, etc. And, it's great. We want to get things going, but they want to hold the brakes off a little bit on this. Part of the thing, too, is that we're hearing the rumblings, of course, now about the cheaper Tesla, and that most likely will be in Texas first, kind of to start things off, and then maybe looking towards Mexico. But either way, you know what? Having been coming to Mexico many years, and I'm sure Eric can attest to this as well with his work, Mexico is an interesting place. There's lots of oh yeah, we're going to do this and everything. But when it comes down to it, it sometimes needs to be backed off a little bit in terms of the excitement and that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I agree there, Ian. 1 second, let me see. No, still haven't started construction yet. But I think there's a lot of politics at play in this as well, too. Obviously the governor is probably, touting his horn a little bit here in the region in Nuevo Leon here. And he's probably, saying, hey, this is going to bring jobs. And I was successful in securing this. And now all of a sudden Tesla's dragging this out, and of course now he's probably thinking, oh no, he's got voters to account to as well too. So there's probably a little bit of politics involved, and I think you're right there, Ian. Too, is Tesla is still trying to ramp up production at its Austin facility right now, and they're still trying to fill that in to some extent. And they still have quite a bit of capacity that they can grow with their existing facilities to some extent today. So I don't think they're in a rush to build this huge facility here in Monterey. So, but they will get around to it probably eventually as they grow.
Mm-hmm.
And Monterey is a little bit of a special place because it is an area that is a sort of a water crisis zone. It tends to be a very dry city, and it tends to have issues. So there's certainly some valid concerns there. And right now, our facility, there's more jobs than people here right now. So Tesla's talking about hiring a lot of people, but there isn't many people, in Monterey right now. There's so many businesses relocating to Monterey right now that it is putting a lot of pressure on the existing businesses that are here right now. So there'll be a huge amount of competition for talent when this happens.
I wore my Rush shirt specifically for this. There's no rush in this. Anyways,
well, that's a bad segue, but okay. We've got an issue in Mexico as well. Is that as Eric has mentioned, there is a bit of a labor shortage when it comes to plants. And of course, Tesla's got a great name, so they'll probably attract a good amount of people to them. But there's also a different culture. As Eric has mentioned before, there's a different way of doing things in Mexico than what is happening in the United States or Texas, for example. Mm-hmm. There's a different feeling amongst the people. So it's going to be a learning curve for Tesla. I am sure they will get it built, and I'm sure they'll start churning out cars at some point. But I think that there's going to be a learning curve for them a little bit as they are introduced to yet another country for a new factory. Other thing I wanted to point out was that a lot of the messaging is leaking out about this Tesla plant from the officials in Mexico. It's not coming from Tesla. Yeah. And the reason, of course, is, as Eric has already mentioned, is that the government in those sections of the country are trying to blow their horn a little bit to say, look what I brought, look what's coming our way, look at the jobs that are coming, look at the economic dollars that will be eventually here, look at the spin-off businesses. So they're really excited to get this rolling because they know what's on the other end of it. And of course, they're, as mentioned, they're probably a little bit nervous at this point as Tesla delays the start of the groundbreaking, because as soon as they start breaking the ground and putting the infrastructure in place, of course, the tax dollars start to roll in. So it'll be interesting to see if it does happen in March, which is now the date that we're being told.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So anyways, from that, Senor, I got the best price for you, free.
But I'll probably be back down in March, so I can look out the window and check and see again. So
there's some construction going beside my place here. It's actually quite large. Maybe they're building something here. You never know.
Parts distribution.
I can invite you on over to my pool, have some tostadas. We'll hang out. It'll be cool. All right. So moving on to back in the lovely 10-degree weather of Ontario. We got some interesting news about the government is actually going to be doing some investments to make the actual building of charging stations that much better. I put this little map down here just because it really shows Southern Ontario. We have a ton of charging stations in Southern Ontario, but the further north you get, and especially between Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay, while there's the Tesla network, and somewhat the Petro-Canada network, there still is some issues in that respect. But anyways.
Yeah, so the thing I found interesting about this story was that, in Ontario, we have like 58 different jurisdictions that are governed by different local distribution companies. And these local distribution companies, they have each have different permits and systems in place for how you install electrical infrastructure in those particular areas. Here, the Ontario government's come back and said, okay, now for EV charging, we're going to set a particular process, make it easier to get these permits done, and everybody follows it the same way, no matter where you are in Ontario, basically. So it becomes a consistent process, it's straightforward, and this makes it a lot easier, especially for charging companies that may be from the outside or maybe not even from Ontario, or even operating within Ontario, and they're not too sure about the rules from one jurisdiction to another. This just streamlines the process and hopes to get the installation of chargers faster. So there's a lot of promises today about a lot of chargers coming to Ontario, but then there's always these long lead times for getting it installed, getting it permitted, getting it approved, and getting it installed. So what I like about this is this should speed up the process and make for a consistent, clearer process, hopefully, for getting the infrastructure into Ontario quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. If you can standardize that process, it's going to speed things up. And certainly from people from the outside that have no experience in Ontario, being able to deal with all the 58 different utilities in the same manner is going to make a lot easier for them to get their paperwork done and get it submitted, and to know what to expect from those utilities in the way that it's all been standardized. So that's a big plus, and I can see that helping move the needle as we start to get more and more infrastructure in this province.
Mm-hmm. You know, and the standardization aspect of things, it doesn't make it so much the Wild West anymore. If, you know, companies know that there is a certain process that they need to follow and everyone's kind of doing this, it's in general, I think, just going to make things smoother. And if there are any like bumps along the road, you know, that company that might have, say, found that bump in the process, you know, is just going to help those, you know, later putting in more charging stations. I think that's what I hope anyways to see. So, you know, we'll find out how that all works as they deploy the chargers in the region of the province and all that stuff. Yeah. Cool. All right, to the next one.
We get all sorts of props this month.
Hey, it's Mexico. They got tons of percussion here. You know, we got the guitar, this stuff. Hey,
we should have got sombreros, man.
yeah, totally. You know, totally.
Oh man. Well, yeah, this article comes to us from Global News, and typically when we see a news group report on electric vehicles, lately there's been a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that has been spread. But what I like about this article is it's actually written in a way that makes sense to people from the outside and not knowing what an EV is and what some of the facts versus fiction items are when it comes to electric vehicles in Canada. And they've done a fairly good job in outlining some of these questions that come up over and over. For example, a question that we've heard over time and time again is, for example, will the electric vehicles collapse the current power grid that Ontario uses? And of course, we know the answer is no to that. But what's nice is that this article goes over the explanations and talks about what's going to happen between the next 5 to 10 to 28 to 30 years, and how the percentage of increase is going to come to the electric grid system, and how we're already dealing with increases in electricity demand from industry and from homes and from people, and that how this really over a period of time works out to be, you know, somewhere in the area of 0.5% to a percentage of increase per year. And that's something that really a lot of people spreading the FUD come back and say it's going to be this big change overnight, when really it's not. It's a gradual change as people start to buy electric vehicles and work them into their lives. So very nice that this article goes through some of these things. It talks about range anxiety, about it still being a thing, and how, in fact, over time, the manufacturers have started to add more kilometers of range inside of vehicles, and how that this is becoming something that is disappearing when people are charging at home, or they're able to quick charge outside of their houses. and that really you're only looking for range in the typical sense when you're doing those trips from region to region or from region to another city. So it's explaining what these myths are, and it's actually putting some solid proof down to prove to people about how it's actually going to benefit you, as opposed to trying to scare you with all these facts that we've heard in the past from the naysayers. Another question it answers is, where's the power coming from? And does it really create pollution anyways? And again, it's that, where is the tailpipe coming from? Is it a longer tailpipe that goes to a coal producing plant instead of it coming out of your car? And of course, there are people still in Ontario believe that Ontario has coal plants to burn. We don't. Yeah. They disappeared a number of years ago. But it gives the breakdown of the electricity in the province. For example, 60% of it is, at this point, is hydro or tidal electricity that Ontario enjoys, and we've got nuclear at 15%. We've got wind at 5%. So it gives you the details of what is actually happening in today's market, and there's a whole bunch of questions that goes through, probably about 15 or so questions. And what's also nice is that it's in a format that you can use on your phone. So you can bookmark this. And when you're talking to that kind of friendly neighbor that wants to always say about things, about how things are going to be worse with electric vehicles, it's maybe good to have this on hand, that some of these answers are available to you quickly, and you can share the link with somebody that you want. So I'm pleasantly surprised with Global News's actual response to some of these questions, and I think it's a good resource.
Yeah, when you said bookmark, that was the first thing that came to my mind. Funny enough, last Sunday, I went to a jam in the afternoon again, and I got talking with a couple of ladies. One was from Oregon, one was from Vancouver, and I said, "Oh, I actually spoke at the convention center last September." And she's like, "Oh, on what?" And I said, "Electric vehicles," and she's just lost it. And it was like, "Oh, so you feel good about lithium coming from Africa?" So right away, it's just like, "Okay, miss." And you know what? I couldn't get her to stop, and I just kind of like, "Well, you have a nice afternoon." But it was funny because then I got this article from yourself, and it was just like, where was this when I needed it? But again, it was one of those things where I don't think it would have mattered. This lady just had it in her head that everything about electric vehicles was bad. About her friend, getting 2-3 hours to charge a car, and they couldn't go from here to there in BC, and blah blah blah, and so when this article came out. And again, I was really surprised actually to see this from Global News. Not that I expect them to be, necessarily a bias or anything, but I thought this is actually really cool that they did this. And the questions, especially with disposal and where the power comes from, were a big one. And then the battery replacement costs. I mean, she brought that up about the guy with the, I can't remember what she said, but tens of thousands of dollars for battery replacement because of the Insurance Bureau of BC. And that's a whole fiasco in itself. But you know what? The facts versus fiction, it's actually no different than this week we had the Cybertruck rust. No, it doesn't. And it was just one person put something out, and there is the facts about what is actually going on. And unfortunately, we still live in this era of people who want to support that orange monkey guy. And not look at the reality of that. But you know what? This helps. At some point, it does get to a point where you basically have to look at the person and say, well, you can believe whatever you want. The world is flat. Go for it. Because that's really what it comes down to. And you can't change some aspects of it as much as you want to. But this is a great resource. I thought, Global did a really good job on this.
Yeah, this was a fantastic article. Really, really well done. Just wanted to issue a little correction, is that those power numbers, Mark, are actually Canada-wide, not just for Ontario. So, but yeah, it's a very well written article, and actually a little bit surprised. It's the first time I've seen an article this well done from one of the major media outlets. So, yeah, it's great to see that some real information is getting out there to people. And from the grid perspective, again, we talk about this a lot, but basically an EV is basically equivalent to adding an air conditioner to your house. The only difference is that the EV, you have more control. You're not necessarily consuming that power in the middle of the day at the worst possible time. Most of these are going to be charging in the evening or late at night, so in which the grid actually has more capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. No, it was good, and like you say, it was good to see global news and mainstream media, put this out and really kind of puts to bed a lot of these, the myths big time.
I'm thinking that maybe we should send this to a couple other news companies that aren't really on point when it comes to EVs, because I think Global nailed it, and maybe sharing it with a few other news outlets when they send those FUD stories might be ideal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I've even seen like left-leaning media outlets like CBC even miss pretty badly on some of this stuff. So yeah, this is a good article.
Yeah. So, all right. Something like that. I know there's a bunch of IIOs because I don't know Spanish very well. Actually, this is the Cybertruck theme. I rust. No rust, no rust, no. Oh my God, it's so bad.
Yeah.
You realize our subscriber base is just going to skyrocket now.
Yeah, or drop off the cliff, one or the other.
Yeah.
So, of course, I wasn't at the International Auto Show. I saw that you guys were. That was very cool. I had a friend who also, went to the show, and of course, he had to take his mug Photoshop with the Cybertruck because he hates the thing. He says, for him, it's the ugliest thing he's ever seen. He actually made a comment. He says, other than the Barbie car, he said he wasn't really impressed overall. He says he misses the days of old. But you know what? Hey, you know what? Maybe like they say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And they are, classic cars are classic cars. They're pretty cool. But we are in a world now with a lot more technology changes and everything. But what I did see, and this was an article that was showing some of the really unique vehicles that they had there. And of course, the Cybertruck I'm sure was a big one. I still haven't seen the Cybertruck as of yet. I was hoping to right before I went to Mexico, but that didn't happen. But then we also got the Fisker Ocean, which an SUV with 579 kilometers of range. And then I love the fact, sustainably made cabin with 110 pounds of recycled and bio-based materials, whatever that exactly might mean, I'm not sure. But then we got the Ford Bronco. And of course, I'm taking, I guess this the same Bronco that was converted by the couple in Peterborough?
Actually, yeah, I believe it is.
It is. I thought so. Yeah. And then the other big thing was this, I'm not sure, Remat Navara?
Remat Navara.
Okay, there you go. And it's 412 kilometers per hour top speed. Like, wow, that's pretty incredible. So we got a good rocket going here. So anyways, these cars, of course, I think there was the 6 must-see cars. These are the 4 that were electric that I brought up. And, that Bronco, I kind of like that, actually. Yeah. I like the Surf Blue. Being a bass player, Fender has the Surf Green and a Surf Blue Fender basses. Could be a Precision, could be a Jazz, etc. Mustang. But the color, of course, is very similar to this. And like, oh, this is pretty cool. Yeah. What was your impression of the Cybertruck, out of curiosity?
Well, Eric and I, of course, from our Facebook photo, were at the Cybertruck table for lunch, so that was kind of cool. Yeah. And again, I got to see it. This was my second time, and the word that just keeps coming to my head is big, because of course I'm not a truck person. I don't own a truck. I don't have room for a truck in my life as to what I use a vehicle for. But man, this thing is a beast. It is a monster. And of course, its shape is so polarizing. The choice of metal on the outside again is something that makes it a showstopper. It is a billboard. If I had a company that needed attention, this is the vehicle I would buy and plaster my company's name all over it, because it just draws people to it. It's amazing the amount of attention that this vehicle gets.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those vehicles that I would say is definitely grabs a lot of attention. Definitely pops out there. But on the other side of it, I would say it's one of those things where Elon Musk kind of came up with this shape and this form and said, okay, now try to make it functional. Mm-hmm. And I think the engineers have done a pretty good job of making it functional, but there's certainly some compromises because of that. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of jokes about this thing would never pass European pedestrian. It might be perfect for the zombie apocalypse because it would probably sever quite a few limbs as you're driving through the piles of zombies. But there's some interesting tech in it for sure, definitely, and it's got everybody talking. So
what you're telling me, Eric, is that I should get this and then drive it down the bike lane to one.
Yeah. We are not suggesting that at all, Ian. And the lawyers are quite upset. They're calling me right now. So,
a disclaimer: we do not issue advice on this show for any reason whatsoever. But the Remat NAA, that is that vehicle is just it's a $2.5 million car, but it's just it holds like 27 world records for different acceleration, deceleration, all sorts of things. And the speed limit, the 412 kilometers an hour, is limited by its tires. So the tires would fly apart. It can actually go faster than that, but because of the tires, it can't. The tires are the limit. So that car is just absolutely amazing. And one of the things I love about Remat and their CEO, Matt Remat, is that Remat is mostly an engineering company. So they do this car just as a technological display, and they do a lot of subcontract work for companies like Volkswagen, Porsche, Hyundai, Kia, Koenigsegg, and all sorts of stuff as well too. So a lot of the electric technology that's in a lot of cars today, some of that has come out of Remat as well too.
Right on.
And it was interesting that owner of Remat's had indicated that if you want to build a supercar and you want to get into the supercar market, he said electric is the only game in town. It's over for gas cars. They cannot keep up, and the technology has moved on into electric vehicles. And as far as he can see, the gasoline versions of these supercars are no more.
Yeah. So this sounds like it'd be a lot of fun at 3 a.m. on the 401.
You're just looking to get us in trouble, aren't you, Ian?
Oh, I'm in Mexico. What do I care? Oh, man. All right. I better move on here before I get myself in trouble. Okay. This is a really interesting, a friend of mine actually, before we did this show, another friend has sent me this, I'm trying to remember what's the YouTube channel? Undecided with Matt Farrell, is it?
Yeah, Undecided with Matt Farrell, yes, that's correct.
And my buddy sent me this, and I watched it because, of course, the house here in Mexico is completely powered off-grid with bifacial panels, 530 watts each. There's 10 of them here. The pontoon boat the solar electric pontoon boat is also bifacial. But this is just such an interesting aspect of what happens if, let's put them up straight up and down instead of on an angle. And it's, it's pretty interesting, the results that they got out of this. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are bifacial solar panels, so they can produce solar panels on both sides of the panels. And traditional solar, has it so that you take your solar panel and you point it right at the sun, basically. And the idea is you're supposed to have your solar panel at the angle of your latitude, basically, is the ideal, so that your solar panel is pointed at the sun most of the time. But what they're finding is during the peak day, when you have peak sun hitting your solar panels, that generates a fair bit of heat. And that affects the efficiency of your solar panel. So solar panels produce less power when they're hot. Mm-hmm. So what this experiment did is they took bifacial solar panels. Instead of having them face south, they had them face east-west. And so that one side picks up the sun in the morning and the other side picks up the sun in the evening. And by having them placed vertically, they cool better. They get better cooling during the process. And what they found is that on average, by doing this, that the solar panels actually generated about 15% more power. And they did so a little bit more averaged over the course of the day as well, too. So they found this might be a better way to install solar panels in many cases than pointing them directly at the sun.
Mm-hmm.
These are interesting things that we're learning with solar as more and more of this gets installed in different ways. We know about that installation in London that has cladded the outside of their apartment buildings with solar panels, have made it basically a decoration or a siding look to the apartment building. And, you don't get the bifacial in that particular example. But again, you've got all of this space available to you. And if it fits not in one way, it may fit in another way. And this is another example of that we can do this in a few different ways. And because of the decreasing cost of solar and the increasing amount of wattage per panel, it starts to make sense in many different applications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the applications I found pretty cool was along the side of highways for sound barriers.
Yeah.
So they're putting solar panels up as sound barriers, basically, and so they have dual use functions.
Yeah, and of course Toronto is looking at doing that, and I thought that was just a great idea, because you're now getting multi-purpose served with this type of thing as well. And of course, in the last month we've seen the actual efficiency of solar panels now breaking more barriers. So a company has now done 28% efficiency. And they actually said, well, at 28% we can prove and show on paper and everything, but we actually are past 30 now. And then, of course, they're using perovskite. Perovskite is something that I've been watching probably now for 3 years, I think, that they've been talking about this. And basically, it's cheaper than silicon, more abundant, I think, as well. It was a matter of getting that figured out how to use it. And there is a company that is now showing this. And that efficiency, now some people might, I've heard this from before, oh, what do you mean your panels are only like 18 to 20% efficient at the time? But of course, I always bring up, well, the gas car is lucky to be 15 to 20% efficient as well. So, the fact that we're now getting to close to the 30%, and that's a huge, that number is going to be huge and impactful in terms of our future growth, not only for solar, but just renewable energy in general on that aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. And to that point, Ian, we talk about efficiency, but capturing 18% of sun is better than capturing zero. And the loss energy is basically just sunlight hitting the ground or your roof. So it's not comparable to other methodologies necessarily. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyways, it was really cool to see this. And of course, Eric, you and I both we've done some work with solar. And I mean, in 2010, when I put my first system up and a 200-watt panel was $900. And here we are with 600-watt bifacial panels, which are less than like around $500. So, the costs have really come down, and it's amazing. And this is just kind of a really cool thing to kind of come out and, hey, just took an experiment, basically. Yeah. All right. I've kind of lost my my musical, what
you lost your inspiration there, Ian.
Yeah.
Maybe you need a shot of tequila there, Ian. Get it back.
My dog's name is Perro. My dog's name is Perro. Perro means dog in Spanish.
Yeah.
I actually, if I do ever get another dog, I may name him Perro.
Well, so you're saying I should name my cat Gato?
Gato. Yeah, why not? Perro Gato. Sounds like a good animation.
There you go. Our next story brings us a little closer to home for me. For those guys, not close at all. But this is a story about Brampton, Ontario, and it kind of is linked to Eric's previous story about the all the utilities starting to come into sync as to how they submit and approve permits for charging. Brampton, of course, has a large urban area. They have a large area where people live in apartments and condos, multi-person dwellings, and they've got an issue where they're going to need more charging that's publicly accessible. And what this article talks a little bit about is now that this standardization is in place as to how to permit and build solar for build charging networks. They are putting out the bids to these different providers of EV charging and asking for bids to come in about charging hubs, about how can we make it better for the citizens of an urban area like Brampton to be able to charge their vehicles overnight through the evening, and what type of structure should we be building in the city in order to get these people that don't necessarily have access to a single car family garage. How can we get these people involved in the EV revolution as well? So, and this is important work because we know that there are, I forget what the stats are right at this moment, but there's a high percentage of people that live in multi-unit dwellings and don't have access to a driveway or a garage where they could just charge. They're charging, or they're parking on the streets. They're parking in multi-level parking garages, and a lot of these places do not have access to public charging. So Brampton's doing important work here where they're bringing in the different EV charging companies like Flow and others and asking them what solutions can we build for a city model that can work in Brampton. And of course, as they find things that do work, this can be spread across other urban areas inside of Canada. So I'm excited to see what can be done with this. It's good that Brampton is actually taking the lead on this and actually going out to these charging companies and saying, okay, start submitting to us your plans, your ideas. How can we make urban charging a better thing for the residents of a city?
Yeah, I gotta say, Brampton is really taking the lead in a lot of areas. We had earlier stories about their public transportation as well too, and pushing it forward with electrification of their public transportation. So, moving ahead here and trying to address some of the gaps in the charging network and some of the people out there that have difficulties. Some of the gaps in getting people to own an EV. That's excellent that they have the foresight to do this and taking advantage of the new rules and the new streamlined rules from the Ontario government to partially do that. So
yeah. It's interesting too because Brampton's mayor is Patrick Brown. I'm correct, right? The name Patrick Brown, who
Correct.
also was at one point a conservative, and like you say, they're doing some they're moving forward some of these initiatives. So I really was kind of, when this article came up, I'm like, this is kind of interesting because, again, a conservative mayor, I kind of like, wow, he's actually, looking at this as a really good future and to do this. And you know what? To test the infrastructure, that is a key thing that, to test this stuff is really important that it is, we're figuring this out as we go, check out the bumps in the road, as we can say. And make sure that this is actually going to work properly. I think it will, and I'm really happy to see that Brampton is doing more of this type of stuff. It's interesting, and this is, again, you're gonna kind of laugh at me because here we go again, Ian, about the bike stuff. But Toronto, Bloor, as far as I think it's Bloor Street, has taken away a lot of parking spaces for a bike lane, and and a lot of people in the businesses are kind of getting upset because it's like, well, what are you doing for our business when people can't park? And they're suggesting, you can park here, you can park there. But then it's like, well, now you've got this electric charging spot as well that you could potentially have put in. It seems like a difficult kind of a balance to do this aspect of things, to make everyone happy. But I am considering that Brampton I think is really going to show what they what can be done, and hopefully inspire other municipalities.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So this came out this week, this article, and it seems like BYD, in fact, they're available here in Mexico, as far as I can tell. More so, I think, Mexico City. I was actually checking out the BYD Song, I think it was called. It was an SUV, and it was like a hybrid sort of a system. But anyways, the main point with BYD is the fact that they actually are really kind of going after prices with the gas cars. Whether it's a plug-in hybrid aspect or whether it's a full battery. And you can see, the price of these are, wow, they're really down, and compared to even a gas car. And somebody, actually, funny enough, I just saw on a Facebook forum recently that, when someone was saying, oh, electric cars are expensive, but you look at gas car, most of them now, they're like 60, 65 grand now. They're not that cheap, cheaper than an electric vehicle. And actually, if you got the incentives, as an example, with Quebec, a friend of mine he's going to be the first in Canada, at least in Quebec, anyways, with the EV9, the Kia EV9. He put his name on at least a year or 2 years ago, or whenever that was first announced. He put his name on it, and he's getting quite a bit of money back on that with the incentive, which makes it that much more reasonable. But this is a whole other ball game when we're getting into something like this.
Yeah, BYD is an interesting company. They're one of their big owners is Berkshire Hathaway, good old Warren Buffett. Yeah, and they've taken an interesting approach to EVs. A lot of car companies have focused on energy dense battery cells, NMC or NMCA battery type chemistries that are very energy dense, very power dense. BYD took a step back, and they're focusing on using lithium iron phosphate, which is not as energy dense, still pretty power dense, but it's a very inherently safe battery cell. So they can do what's called a cell to pack. So they can pack their cells now differently in the battery pack, differently than other manufacturers. A lot of them have to use modules or have to put a different structure around the battery packs in order to support them. But BYD basically uses a cell to pack system, which is, the battery cell is a little less dense, but now they can take some weight out of the battery itself, the encase and the enclosure, and they can make up for some of that density changes. And that also takes cost out of the battery as well, too. Mm-hmm. So they've taken some weight out of the structure of the battery, and they've taken some cost out because of that as well in their cell to pack technology, and still are generating very effective and very good batteries. Like the QIN Plus EV here has roughly 50 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is very reasonable, gives you a pretty good car, basically, in pretty reasonable ranges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's something that is, like Eric said, it's a different way of addressing the problem. Another thing that BYD seems to do is they're doing in large volumes. They're trying to attack the market by producing as many vehicles as possible to get the price down overall. And we see this in Mexico starting to be, is that BYD is trying to map their introduction to Mexico to build a plant there and then start supplying these vehicles to not only Mexico, but its free trade partners, the United States and Canada. So BYD is coming. It is coming to Canadian shores, and it will be most likely through Mexico. And it will be interesting to see, with a price that's similar to this, probably a little bit higher in Canada, as to how this affects the current market players in our automotive industry as they start to push into Canada. And again, cost matters a great deal to many of us, and it may be a deciding factor in what vehicle you pick as a future car.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, now you mention this too, Mark. I'm just thinking in my head, the charging port, are they going to be adopting the NACS standard?
BYD has not said what they're going to do yet in North America, but I gotta believe
Yeah.
they're going to have to. Or, you know, they could maybe. I think it would be a blunder if they didn't. But
Yeah.
we'll have to see. Again, they haven't announced their plans yet in North America. But when they do, I'm pretty sure they're probably going to pick NACS as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't taken a look yet there, Ian, but I don't know if you've noticed, but if they're in sale in Mexico today, are they using CCS right now?
Again, you know, I haven't looked enough into it, but I did. It's funny, because, you know, when you look at something and then the algorithm comes up and it's like, oh, check this out. And it was a straight advertisement for BYD and their SUV, which is a plug-in hybrid. And I couldn't find that aspect of it, the way that they had laid it out. But yeah, good question. That's something I'll have to dig a little more into and see what I can find out. I'd be curious, just, you know, I should even just see if there's a phone number to call somewhere in Mexico City and just get some information on this, you know, because it's, you know, here in Mexico, of course, electric is, I would say electric is come from Mexico City, Guadalajara, probably Monterrey, but areas that I'm in here, of course, we only have, I only see so many, like, Teslas, so to speak. There's a guy with a Model X I've seen around, and some other person with a Model Y. Of course, my friend from Quebec City is down with his Model Y. I had to laugh. I ran into him at Home Depot. His car is completely wrapped. It's black with orange and orange seats. And I said, oh, so you're advertising for Home Depot now. It's just coloring. But, yeah. Anyways, it's we'll have to see how this is all going to pan out.
I just Googled it, and BYD still is using CCS in Mexico.
Yeah, that would be a bit of a deal breaker for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. The Winnebago.
Winnebago, yeah. So what this is interesting. Winnebago built basically it's a concept vehicle, but it's basically they took the Ford Transit electric that exists today, and they basically decked it out as a prototypical Winnebago. It's a camper van or a pretty nice a vehicle. And, you know, they decked it out with induction cooking on the inside, full electric solar panels, flexible solar panels on the roof. What I found most interesting about this, because there's quite a few people who've done this before. They've taken some vehicles and they put solar panels and they've retrofitted vans to do that. But what I found was really special about this is Winnebago has their own battery process here. So they've added their own lithium-ion battery, but they've tied it in. And they've worked with Ford in this case to tie it into the high voltage battery pack of the Ford Transit as well too, so that basically now that these units can actually talk to each other. The Winnebago's control system and Ford's control system can talk to each other, and they can actually run off the high voltage battery or vice versa. They can actually run power back and forth between the two systems, and the systems are actually more interconnected with this. Now this, you know, initial vehicle has a relatively limited range. Obviously, it's a big vehicle, and I think the Ford Transit has like about roughly 80 kilowatt hour battery pack. So it's not doesn't have a huge amount of range. But the other thing I found interesting too is Winnebago has said that they're also working with multiple other OEM partners today to bring other options and other van options to market as well. So they didn't specifically say what OEMs they're working with, but I suspect that possibly they might be working with, you know, possibly Rivian in their van, or even possibly General Motors in the Bright Drop vans as well too, which would be really nice as well.
Mm-hmm. I find it interesting that you can boondock for up to 7 days. And you know what? I will say though, just as an example, because I have a couple of online friends who live out of their Model Y and travel all over the place, but the one friend, she recently posted a place she was going to. They're making it more difficult for her to, so to speak, show up and stay there and check out the park. And part of the problem, of course, we are dealing with the homeless aspect of things, and a lot more difficult now. But this whole idea of boondocking for up to 7 days, and of course with the solar aspect, and maybe that could be expanded. It might be like we can boondock for even longer time. But yeah, the limiting factor for me, the 108 miles of range, they were sort of talking about, well, you can drive for roughly 2-3 hours, and then you got 45 minutes to get an 80% charge, which I think for a lot of people, that's going to be a little bit of a deal breaker on that. If they can move past that part of it and make the charge time less than 45 minutes for 80%, and then also give us, 108 miles is one thing. If they could even do 200 miles, I think you're going to have a little bit more of an audience for something like this.
Yeah, and that's the limitation of the Ford Transit platform they're using today, basically.
Yeah.
But again, if they tie into some of the other vehicles that are on the market today, like, again, if they use the BrightDrop Zevo 400 or Zevo 600, which has, 250 miles of range, that's definitely a different game as well.
Yeah, you're going to see this over time that as battery technology gets better and as different systems fit better, this type of range and charging is going to change. You're going to get more range. It's going to be less charging. Just like the regular cars. This RV industry is definitely watching these type of advancements, and they're all going to be in on it because it makes sense. Their customers want this. They want the ability to have solar on top of their vehicle to collect energy as they're driving or as they're parked, and to add it to the range in the vehicle. They're going to want that ability, and these companies are definitely going to provide it. It's just a matter of the innovations in the industry will get compiled one on top of the other, and we'll see some of these changes quite rapidly, I believe.
Yeah. I should bring up just quickly, actually, down here, probably about a week or so ago, I met a couple, early 30s, maybe late 20s, early 30s, from Switzerland with their Opel van. They had traveled all through Europe, then put the van in a cargo container, shipped it across to Halifax, and then went from Halifax. The guy's mom actually lives in Whitby, Pickering area. And they have traveled all across Canada now and down to the States, and here they are now in Mexico. And they had a solar panel, they had, they use a solar panel for the lighting and everything else and that type of stuff. My point, I guess, is, good for them. They've been on the road for a long time doing this and really checking out the world this way. But if this type of vehicle, if we keep improving this type of vehicle, making it more comfortable, longer range, you know what? It's going to be a great way to travel. And I remember years ago, friends of my parents once said that the only vehicle or the only home they want has 4 wheels. So if they don't like a place, they can go and move somewhere else. So, yeah, this is pretty interesting. All right.
Yes, charging hubs. And another link to home. We've got some video that I'm going to try to share here.
Should I stop my share? Probably.
No, I can probably just override it, I'm guessing.
Okay.
But we'll see. Here we are. I'm going to start sharing now.
Yep.
You guys can let me know if you see it.
See it. We're good.
All right. So here we are over at the Sunrise Center in Kitchener. And what we've got here is a view of the new Tesla supercharger that's going in. Now, everyone's seen a Tesla supercharger. No big surprise. But what I wanted to point out here is that this one is kind of unique. What we've got here is the regular Tesla supercharger, level 3s, that are being placed. And you'll see that there's a white cover over them. There's 8 of them. And then you've got these other stalls in between them with a black bag over top of them. These are level 2 chargers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on the same island as the superchargers, but it's lined up with the other side of the island. So it appears that the Sunrise Center has decided they not only wanted the superchargers, but they wanted 11 L2 chargers spread around the island charging area. So they're going to make use of both sides of the island for charging vehicles. One side will be level 2 and the other side will be supercharger. Now, we haven't seen signs that have gone up yet to indicate where the car is parked to do what, but there is also the possibility with, if this is going to be a supercharger that can be used by other electric vehicles, it may be advantageous for them to park on the other side of the supercharger to plug in, because the cable would be more of a better connection size-wise to the vehicle if it's on the other side of the island. That can be the case for a few different vehicles. So this could give them some flexibility in able to do that. So, and I believe what's happened here is that Sunrise in Kitchener has decided that with all these extra chargers, the best way, of course, to do this would be to just run the conduit once for the digging of the ground, and put both sides of the chargers right there. And to my information that I know about Tesla superchargers, this is unique. I don't think there's another North American supercharger that has the L2s in between the superchargers proper to this point. I've had a few people comment that, yeah, this is unique. They haven't seen it before either. So I'm wondering if this, I'm wondering if Tesla has come up with this design. Maybe Tesla has a number of designs in their back pocket when they go to someone like the Sunrise Center and say, these are the things that we can do based on the space that you have to lease us. And there could be some selection, some sort of selection process for Sunrise and Tesla to decide what works best for the space that they're actually going to use. But yeah, I thought this was pretty cool, and I'm hoping to see this turned on shortly. Just as an update, today the fences are down now, and the charging units are still bagged, but the construction trailers and the fencing is all gone. So it looks like, and of course the cabinets are buttoned up. So it's looking like we're getting closer to them turning this live.
Very cool.
Yeah, I like this. I actually like this setup. It seems like, if you have one person using the supercharger on one side, you could have another person using the level 2 charger on the other side. So, right. And as you mentioned, Mark, EVs sometimes have the charge ports in the back left or the back right or the front left or the front right. And so if they're scaling this for different applications, then this could be for different EVs out there, because that's one of the challenges today with some other manufacturers' EVs that are using the supercharger network, is that sometimes the cable is just not well placed for the orientation where the charge port is in the car. So this gives a little bit more flexibility and freedom that way.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's interesting to see if this is something that they're going to be using elsewhere, or is this something they're testing out? Again, I believe this is one of the first installations of this. I don't recall seeing another that's similar to this.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, because there's lots of shopping that can be done at that place, and not everyone needs a supercharge. They just want to do level 2, and maybe there is also the people who do travel. And this, might be, I could see this being more of a future of these type of superchargers, as long as there is the, you've got your restaurants, you've got your Canadian Tires and other places like that, which makes, sense to put all that sort of together. So we'll see what happens in that respect. And I think, it's going to be a part of a future that makes more sense with a little bit, because not everyone wants to do a supercharger. Like the prices, of course, of level 3 charging has gone up, and maybe not everyone nearly needs that. They just stick with the level 2. We just need enough to get home, type of deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So awesome. I think
now you'll have to share on your end, Ian.
I will have to do a share screen. Got one more slide here, folks. And just to end the night off nicely, this just got announced this week. on Tuesday, and Seattle's public transit, they have ordered 33 of these double-decker electric buses and 15 60-foot articulated electric buses, and they're going to be powered by in-ground inductive chargers. So, hey, very, very cool aspect of, and I'm wondering if this is just not going to open more doors with inductive charging as it expands and gives more possibilities, so to the point that, all the chargers that we're putting in, there's areas that we have now inductive charging and making travel that much more convenient overall. It's going to be interesting to see how this all works out.
Yeah, seeing again another unique solution. We're seeing a lot of this in the EV infrastructure out there. Is that different bus companies are trying different things. High-powered charging from above while they are at a stop. In this case, the power is coming from below. And in other cases, they're loading them up with batteries to run a certain amount on a route. So these are all different solutions depending on what they're trying to do with the buses. And I'm interested to see how this works in Seattle, how they roll it out, and how successful it is on the routes that they put these buses on. Because there has to be a lot of thought put into the particular environment that these buses are going to run on, especially with the where the underground charging is going to be located, because obviously you're not going to be able to dig that up and move it too easily. So it'll be interesting to see how it works on these specific routes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I agree. Inductive charging is something that people have been talking about for at least at this scale and at this power level. They've been talking about for over a decade. I can remember back in the first gen Volt, there was a company that made an inductive charging add-on for the Volt back in the day back there. But it'll be interesting to see how this rolls out and how the technology works, and it'll be an interesting case study. And I think a lot of utilities are going to be watching this as well too. A lot of utilities, a lot of public transit companies, they're going to be watching this to see how it works and how it plays out, and see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it reminds me kind of like the story in Europe, where we see some vehicles that had miles of overhead wires added to the freeway, so that a gantry could go up and connect with those wires, and the truck would just pull in juice from those wires for a number of miles, and would even have a small battery on board, so it would get to the next section with more wires. These are all people looking for solutions. They know how much batteries cost. They know how much energy is required to move these heavy trucks. And these are different solutions that people are trying to feel out and see what works best in these applications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in regards to solutions, just for our audience, if they get a chance, I got a video that I checked out yesterday called, I'm trying to remember what the title was, but it was basically red LEDs and green LEDs had been made, and they were relatively easy to have made. But the blue LED was a Japanese scientist who worked for a company, and the whole story is, it's about a half-hour YouTube thing. And it's blue LEDs was one of the most difficult things to actually create. And when you're talking about the solution for it, this Japanese scientist, he was getting kind of shunned with everything. And at one point he was in Florida, and even the people, the scientists in Florida were like, oh, well, you don't have your PhD. Meanwhile, the guy was smart enough and had enough education. He just didn't have that name behind him. But he took some of the technology that he found out in Florida and applied all these different sort of things. And, I guess my whole point when I'm saying about this, it's an interesting, YouTube thing to check out, but is the solution is sometimes you keep going down a certain pathway and keep fighting down that pathway, and then we go away from it because supposedly it doesn't work. But then you just need one person to go like, well, you didn't try this, or we need to implement this aspect into this problem, which will, suddenly the road just opens up and the solution is completely there. So, and of course, the blue LED, I mean, that made the company millions at one point, if not now, is billions. And the poor guy, the compensation he got for this was ridiculously low. Actually went to court, and by the time he won, it just cost him his legal fees, basically, is what he got back. But the gentleman, of course, now is part of another company working on some incredible ultraviolet LEDs. And even for, like, talking about with COVID aspect, to use this to kill the virus, with this type of technology. So, to your point, again, it's just the solutions, we got to try stuff. And, how many failures do we have to go through? But eventually we find that solution. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep. All right. On that note, we'll end on a positive chord. Road again. Just can't wait to take my girlfriend on the road again in an electric car. Yeah, whatever. We're going to call it a day at that.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Ian, for the musical interludes. And that was fantastic. We want to thank everyone for watching. If you haven't already, please give us a thumbs up in the video. That helps us out. Press that subscribe, and you'll be notified the next time we upload a video to the RVing YouTube page. That would be appreciated as well. And if you want to follow up with some of the articles we've talked about today, they'll be down in the notes section where you can click on links and read to your heart's content. So with that, any shout outs from Mexico? Both my compadres. Ian first. Any shout outs?
To all the taco stands that make my belly happy. And Eric, I don't know if we leave now, maybe we can meet up around 3 a.m. There's got to be a taco stand open somewhere. Halfway point.
Yeah. Well, I think Chihuahua is about halfway between you and me right now. So
Chihuahua.
Yeah, Chihuahua.
Very good. Eric, any shout outs from you this evening?
Mi gato es muy bonito.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, we thank everyone for watching again. Tune in next month when we'll get together and talk about some more electrifying news with this RVing update. Thanks, everyone. Have yourselves a great evening.